What is going on, everybody? Welcome into the Week 15 NFL Power Rankings show. We are into the witching hour, baby, the fourth quarter of the season. Things are coming down to the wire for a lot of these teams. Really excited to talk about how these teams are shaping up as we head into the last push here. Just a quick note, won't have any power rankings next week. I will actually be moving back to Minneapolis. Shout out to all the good people of Charlotte, North Carolina. We love this city and cannot wait to come back. It just was not the right fit for my wife and I, so we will be going back to where we came from in Minnesota. Next week, I will be on the road, and then it's going to be with that and the holidays, a little bit of a slower time with the channel, but I do have some stuff planned this week. Starting to kick off draft season, looking to have a Cam Ward prospect profile type of video here this week. So very much looking forward to that. Just wanted to give you guys a heads up on what you can expect for the next couple of weeks. And yeah, let's go ahead and get started. Please do hit that like button as we do. And of course, make sure you subscribe so you don't miss all that great draft content and the rest of our regular season stuff heading your way. But let's get started at the bottom in the Tankathon tier, bringing the New York Giants back into the rankings last week after I demoted them to the XFL last week. Not that I feel any better about them, but I at least have something to say about them this week, and that is thank God you lost. Look, getting that number one pick is all that matters for the Giants right now so that they can have their pick of the litter with this quarterback class. However good it may or may not be, they get to pick their guy. And whether it's Brian Daboll or Joe Schoen who get to make that decision, that's a bit out of my pay grade. But at least they didn't blow this game by letting the Saints jump over the left guard in their field goal team to not go to overtime. Then at number 31, the Las Vegas Raiders, the battle of the Pirates this week. They showed up. They played hard against the Bucs. They made things really hard for a couple of quarters there. But, Aiden O'Connell gets hurt. We'll see what his situation is. He went from he's out for the year to he might be playing this week. Pretty wild. But yeah, obviously this team just has a hard time hanging against competent football teams, especially in weeks where you're only giving Brock Bowers 2 targets or whatever it was. This team just doesn't have the talent. Hey, Spencer McCormick looks pretty good, though. He might be their starting running back next year. Then at number 30, the Tennessee Titans. They lose to the Jags this week. This offense is just so hard to watch. Keep in mind, as you're getting ready to do your mock drafts and stuff, the Tennessee Titans right tackle situation is one of the biggest weak spots any team has at any position group in the league. Still can't believe Nicholas Petit-Frere is getting trotted out there every single week. They must have a lot of confidence in Coach Callahan to get his play cleaned up. But yeah, things not going in the right direction for Levis or this team in general. But hey, their draft pick definitely took a turn for the better this week. Then the Jacksonville Jaguars, a horrible week for them as they climbed 2 spots in the power rankings this week. They beat the Titans 10-6 with Mac Jones and Doug Peterson at head coach. This win accomplishes them nothing other than falling 4 spots from the number 1 pick to the number 5 pick. Just a brutal beat for Jags fans who I continue to just feel really bad for. If you want one saving grace, it is that Ryan Nielsen's doing a pretty solid job with his defense. Obviously started really bad. Doesn't have a ton to work with there, but playing better as of late. You get some guys like 3rd-round rookie Jerrion Jones playing pretty well. Andre Sisco looking for a contract extension. I wouldn't hate seeing Ryan Nielsen back with another year with this defense if they go with an offensive head coach in this hiring cycle. Then the Cleveland Browns at number 28. It does seem like that win over Pittsburgh in the snow on Thursday Night Football a few weeks ago was a blip, an aberration. They have gone back to really sucking, a horrible outing against the Steelers. The offensive line is just beaten and broken from its former glory. They have no run game, and the defense just can't really play complimentary of the pass rush they get from Myles Garrett. So -5 for Cleveland, back into the Tankathon tier. They quietly have a lot of really challenging decisions to make this offseason. Then at number 27, the New England Patriots. They were on bye this week. I'm interested to see this team kind of, fight the rest of the year. They have a lot of players that are going to be, out there competing for their jobs and their roster spots next season. So I expect this team to be frisky all the way through, even if they do have seriously one of the worst rosters in the league, if not the worst. But at number 26, we will jump up to my next tier. This is the playing for pride tier. These teams are definitely better than that crop we just talked about. But, teams that have no shot at the playoffs, but are definitely tough outs week in, week out. And I will have the New York Jets here at number 26. I don't think this was the worst week if you're a Jets fan looking for any sort of like direction or hopium or whatever it might be. I mean, let's be real. Aaron Rodgers looked good this week. He probably played his best game as a New York Jet, other than maybe that Thursday night football game against the Patriots earlier in the season. But I thought he looked really healthy, frankly, moving around really well. I thought his arm looked really live, made a lot of big throws in that game against the Dolphins. But most importantly, he just looks like he's loose and, dare I say, having fun playing football for a 3-9, 3-10 Jets team. Look, again, we're just looking for some semblance of a direction. If, and this is a big if you can get him to swallow his pride a little bit, you get the right management and coaching in the building, there are far worse options for this Jets team next year than Rodgers looking something like this as a transition veteran quarterback who has shown to be a great mentor for a Jordan Love. Love has given Rodgers a ton of credit in that way. I don't need to spend too much more time on the Jets because they could easily just say, nope, he's a cancer for the organization. We got to get him out of here and do a clean rebuild. But it definitely is feeling more and more like Rodgers is trying to play himself back onto this Jets team next year and loosen up a little bit. So I don't know. It's just what I saw this week. They do lose. Their ability to lose close games is truly, truly special. They were set up to kick a game-winning field goal. They end up going out of bounds with 40 seconds left. They let the kick return go to like the 40, then surrender the field goal to go to overtime, lose the coin toss, never get the ball back, and lose. Really, really remarkable loss in Miami this week, on a week where they generally played pretty well. Then the New Orleans Saints at number 25, maintaining this ranking. They beat the Giants by blocking the field goal that would have forced overtime. You're obviously not a great football team if you're scraping by against the Giants, and we know this isn't a great football team, but they are competing. They're finding ways to win games. Unfortunately, if you're a Saints fan, I mean, them winning 3 out of 4 or whatever it's been is just a worst case scenario for the Saints when we know this team needs to hit the reset button. They're not going to be picking much closer to 10 than they are to number 1. So that their future just continues to get more and more complicated, in my opinion. Then at number 24, the Dallas Cowboys. Another solid outing by this team. They've actually, for what it's worth, impressed me with how competitive they've been since Dak went down. I think I tanked them all the way down to 32 when Dak did get hurt. And for like a week, that looked right. But they've, since they've gotten Micah Parsons back, they've course corrected a little bit. Getting Deron Bland back there in the secondary too, but they lose this game to the Bengals. A punt block, like a really weird random play that really doesn't say much about how good or bad the Cowboys are. They block a punt and then the guy just tries to return it. I don't know if the returner didn't know the rules on that play or what it was, but hey, if that weird random play doesn't happen, if the punt just goes off or if they get the block, I mean, they probably beat the Bengals. So again, I don't know what that means for the future of the Cowboys. That's a whole different conversation, but for whatever it's worth, this team is playing hard under Mike McCarthy. Not sure that's a good thing for Jerry Jones and Cowboys fans. But let's move on to number 23, the Chicago Bears. It just hit me putting these rankings together that the Bears have lost 7 straight. Pretty freaking crazy. So much for the ding-dong, the witch is dead week with Eberflus out the door. Their defense looked as bad as it's looked in a long time in their first week without Eberflus. The offense came out entirely flat. I respect Thomas Brown. I understand Bears fans are excited about him, maybe less so after this week. Promoting him when he already got promoted within this season. Remember this, and I'm not saying he isn't qualified or anything, but this was the Panthers offensive coordinator last year. The Panthers last year. So he gets promoted already internally this season to offensive coordinator. He had to learn that job, and then 4 weeks later, you're promoting him to head coach. Like, that's a double jump. That's just a lot to put on his plate when he already had his handful trying to put together a good game plan for this offense. And clearly, the offense was discombobulated this week with a long week to prepare. So, this team is spiraling right now. They still have a lot of building blocks, and I'm not panicking about their future. But as far as the rest of the season goes, it's probably best that they do keep losing and get a better draft pick. But then at number 22, the Carolina Panthers. I know it's weird to see a 3-10 team up here at number 22, but man, look back at their last 4 weeks. This is a really competitive, tough football team right now. They give the Kansas City Chiefs a scare. They take the Bucs to overtime in a game that they really should have won if Chuba Hubbard just doesn't fumble the ball. And then this week in Philadelphia as 12.5-point underdogs, if Xavier Legette catches that football, I mean, you're talking about the Eagles having 40 seconds left to get a field goal to win that game. I mean, the Panthers are just playing really well. They are getting, dare I say, the best quarterback play out of any team we've talked about so far. I mean, obviously there's been a lot of talk about Bryce Young, but he's playing at a super high level right now. That game-winning drive attempt, look, again, Bryce Young did everything he could, and going against one of, if not the top defenses in the league, he continues to play on time, make throws against the blitz, extend plays with his feet, step up in the pocket, doing everything you would hope the number one pick in year 2 could do. It's just been all positive, really, with Bryce Young for the last 5, 6, 7 weeks. Like, this is really going as well as possible. And hey, that 3-10 record ultimately is a good thing. Get them an impact defender at the top of the draft to help Bryce out a little bit, or a top wide receiver that can catch the ball at a big spot, something like that. So, you could debate, wins are wins, and the Panthers don't deserve to be number 22. Look, you put the Panthers up against any of these teams we've talked about right now, I think my money is on them. Now, before we jump up to our third tier here, I want to thank Underdog for sponsoring today's Power Rankings. Guys, this season is coming down to the end here. And if your team is one of the ones we just talked about, or, fantasy football playoffs starting this week, if you didn't make it, if you got eliminated, but you still want to get in on some fantasy action, Underdog is the place to be. Their pick'em contests are so fun. You string together your lineups of player stats, picking anything from rushing yards to sacks to fantasy points, you name it. You say higher or lower, and if you hit on all of your selections, you are looking at massive payouts on really low-level entries if that's what you want. Or something I've liked doing lately is putting a little bit more down, but flexing the numbers down to more probable outcomes. And lesser payouts, but even higher chances to win. So there's plenty of ways to play Pick'em. They will have best ball for playoffs and stuff, which is really fun too, because you can kind of you don't just have to pick the best players, but you have to pick the players on the teams that are going to go further. So that's really fun too. And right now, if you sign up at Underdog using promo code TFG or scan that QR code on the screen, they will give you a bonus match up to $1,000, so you can take it through the NFL season for NBA pick'ems, MLB pick'ems, into your NFL season next year as well. Again, that is promo code TFG at Underdog. You'll support my channel in the process. And let's get back to the power rankings. So our next tier is the "so you're telling me there's a chance" tier.
What are my chances?
Not good.
You mean not good like 1 out of 100?
I'd say more like 1 out of 1,000,000.
So you're telling me there's a chance? Yeah!
Maybe we could just call this the Dumb and Dumber tier, because some of these teams do make me go a little crazy at times, especially this number 21 team, the Atlanta Falcons. Man, they had it. They were in full control to win this division. Things were looking good. They were pushing top 10 in these power rankings. Everything was working. And then Kirk Cousins just all of a sudden can't tell who's on his team and who's on the other team. He's thrown 8 picks to 0 interceptions the last 3 weeks, 4 weeks, whatever it is. just brutal reads, brutal decisions, the arm talent. These balls are just hanging out there. He can't really make the throws that he once did. He's clearly not comfortable within this offense. It's just a disaster. Not to mention this defense under Raheem Morris has not figured things out. They've actually kind of figured out the pass rush the last couple of weeks, so I'll give them some credit for that, but it has not led to results. The secondary just completely falls apart this week. Man, this defense was a lot tougher and more consistent under Ryan Nielsen, their defensive coordinator last year, who's doing a pretty decent job in Jacksonville, by the way. But yeah, this hire of Raheem Morris, this signing of Kirk Cousins has really taken a U-turn in the worst of directions. And they are now in second place in the NFC South. And to not win this division after they were favorites heading into the year is a serious, serious disappointment. No other way to put it. Then we have the Indianapolis Colts at number 20. They are going to lose a spot on the bye week this week just because a couple other teams impressed me this week that we'll talk about. But the Colts have a very reasonable path to get this done. Their remaining schedule is extremely easy. A big game against the Broncos coming up this Sunday. If they can win this weekend with Anthony Richardson, who's playing better, this team could very much be in business. So they are a team to keep an eye on here as we move forward. The -1 is not an indication that I feel worse about the Colts. It's just other teams I feel better about. The Cincinnati Bengals are, for a similar reason, going to lose 3 spots this week. Just other teams stepping up this week. But hey, they get a win, a much-needed win, even if it took a bounce to go their way, but that's been the opposite of the case this entire season. Likewise with the Bengals that we talked about the Colts. They need some help. They also play the Broncos, though, I think next week, if not week 17. But their remaining schedule is practical. Not likely, but practical that they could get to 9-8, especially with Joe Burrow playing the way he's playing. I mean, you could make a case, him, Josh Allen, like these have been the 2 best quarterbacks in the league this year. This situation around Burrow just hasn't quite helped this team win games, obviously. That defense, a record 4 losses, giving up 30 points on that side of the ball. The Bengals aren't quite dead yet. Vibes are good this week coming off the win. And we'll see where it goes. Either way, though, these are power rankings week to week. I don't want to play this team. They are an incredibly tough out, knowing you basically got to score 30 if you're going to beat the Bengals. Doing that against this defense is not as hard as against most, pretty much any team in the league. But that's, it is still the NFL. Scoring 30 is not a guaranteed. But then the Arizona Cardinals at 18. Look, I love Kyler Murray. I have defended him maybe more than anybody out there, but he's just been disappointing. There's no way around it. They had the first place in this division, and when I did the how it started versus how it's going breakdown for these teams several weeks ago, I pointed out that I don't know that I'm necessarily picking the Cardinals to finish out this division. It was still going to be tough for them to do that. It doesn't make it hurt any less, but man, Kyler, I mean, he comes out, he throws the 2 picks early in this game after a pretty good start for the Cardinals. And then, frankly, to me, it felt like instead of putting the pedal down to make up for those mistakes, he proceeded to, throw check downs, didn't extend plays, just really, really a bad game against the Seahawks in their biggest game of the year. So, I still love Kyler. I'll still defend Kyler, and I he's the franchise quarterback here, and there's plenty of reason that this team can continue to build and get there next year. But it is disappointing to see that type of performance in a big spot like that. So -4 for the Cardinals. Their playoff hopes are really hanging on by a thread. Their schedule lightens up. I think they've got the Patriots this week, so they can get right back into the mix here. This NFC West is super, super tight. If the Niners beat the Rams and the Seahawks lose to the Packers on Sunday Night Football, they would be just a game behind Seattle. So it's not over yet, but this definitely makes things really unlikely for them. And they're just not playing great ball right now, even though the defense continues to kind of overachieve in many ways. But then at number 17, the Bucs, exactly where they were last week, which makes sense because they had 2 really good quarters and 2 just horrendous quarters against a bad Raiders team. So not really feeling better about the Bucs, not really feeling worse about the Bucs. This team is really in flux right now. I do think there is a version of this team, if they can get healthy and start to play more consistent football down the stretch here, that can get up into more of that like legitimate playoff caliber tier. There's been moments in this season where this team has really looked potent, but right now just their defense is porous. Antoine Winfield goes down with a knee injury this week. We'll see what his status is moving forward. But Baker, frankly, has had some sloppy football in recent weeks that I just don't love. That was a big part of the Bucs earlier in the year when I thought they were really roaring. Was Baker was putting up more elite performances than you would expect. That's not really been the case. So they're in first place in their division. Thanks for that, Atlanta. We'll see if they can get healthy and kind of straighten this out. This is a locker room and a coaching staff at large, for the most part, that has done this in years past. That Bucs Super Bowl team kind of got hot in the last 4 or 5 weeks of the year. Last year they did it. So I'm not ruling out that the Bucs can't climb up these rankings in weeks moving up, but they've got to prove that they can do that first. But then at number 16, the Miami Dolphins, who I buried last week after a really dreadful week going up to Lambeau Field. Losing that one and really what felt at the time like a season ender. But they take a deep breath. They get a win in overtime against the Jets in a week where the offense looked good. Tua played maybe his best game of the year, starting to push the ball into the intermediate part of the field a little bit better. And this Dolphins offense, I think, has really found their groove a little bit. The screen game is nasty. Jonnu Smith has really been a nice pickup for them. He took over in overtime. But with Achane and the way that they run this offense, it's very gimmicky. It's RPOs, the ball's out of your hand immediately, getting this athletic offensive line on the move. But McDaniel, again, finding his groove a little bit as a play caller. So they're settling in. I don't think they're back to the hype you had on them heading into the year. But they did respond well this week, and their season is still alive. They're one of these teams that has a punter's chance at the playoffs, depending on if they can get some help from some of these AFC wildcard teams or not. And then the San Francisco 49ers at 15. Just when they look dead, they kind of reel you back in. A dominant win over the Chicago Bears. Brock Purdy playing really well in this game. Shanahan kind of getting back to the drawing board with the screen game and the play action game. Really making things easy. Big Jawan Jennings week. George Kittle. Him being healthy, and you got to remember when we tanked them the last couple of weeks, Kittle hadn't really been out there for them, but God, he is the best tight end in football right now. I know people will say Brock Bowers, but Kittle is the complete package with the blocking. But even as a receiver, I mean, when Kittle gets the ball in his hands, he is really one of the most dangerous players with the ball in his hands in the league right now. So they still have him. The defense is doing just fine. They're hopefully going to get Nick Bosa back. We'll see. It's a short week. They're a tough team because we know what their upside is, but we know how injured they are and how this season has gone to this point. Just the biggest of games this Thursday in the biggest of spots to really open up their hopes for this season again. And I think of all the teams we've talked about, this is definitely the team, at least at this point in the rankings, that nobody wants to have to play in January, right? But with that said, I don't quite have them in the playoff caliber tier. A win over the hapless Bears isn't quite going to get you there, in my opinion. Let's take that jump up to our next tier. The LA Chargers at number 14, they've just kind of capped out. They impressed us so much with how they've raised the floor of this team with the run defense, the O-line, Herbert, obviously, what he's doing this year, but they just have kind of run out of horses to, try to keep climbing the ranks. And they haven't been able to show that they can beat playoff caliber football teams that just have more talent than them. They let the Chiefs kind of, put the game away on them at the end. They have a good defense, and they have shattered expectations on that side of the ball, and their future is very bright there, I think, as long as Jesse Minter is there. But they're porous. They really are up the spine of that defense. Just got a lot of work to do to build that group up. And obviously the offense just isn't dynamic right now with the playmakers that they have. So -1 for the Chargers, but still a tough team. They're going to play everybody tough, and depending on how the ball lands at the end, they can still win hard football games. But it's tough to bet on them to do that. You know what I'm saying? Then we got the Broncos at 13, a very similar football team. They were on bye this week. Very interested to see how they finish up this season. Their schedule is tough. And what's interesting and why the AFC wildcard race is so wide open is a lot of these guys are playing each other. The Broncos have to play the Colts, the Bengals, and the Chargers. All teams kind of at least eyeing that 7 seed in the AFC. So, there is a world where the Broncos do go 0-3 in those games and completely open the door. Or there's a world where the Broncos continue to impress and win these tough football games with great coaching, underrated quarterbacking in Bo Nix. And I'm pulling for them, man. Nobody really believes in this Broncos team, I think, and even I throw some shade at them just because their talent base just has a ways to go, and they've got the rookie quarterback. But so far, 3/4 of the way through the year, they've been the most impressive team to secure these W's. So they will maintain their position in the playoff caliber tier, although losing a spot, as a couple of other teams that we're going to talk about shortly have impressed. The Commanders also were on bye this week. Same reasoning. Just a couple of teams had big weeks, are going to jump them. I don't have too much to add on the Commanders. They have a big test to kind of secure that playoff spot down the stretch as well, with a couple of these NFC teams, especially out of the NFC West, kind of, making a push for that 7 seed. So we'll see if they can secure what's been just a brilliant season for them and get into the playoffs. That is a huge accomplishment for this team if they can do that. Then the Texans, another team that was on bye this week, and another team that is going to get passed up on the bye. This team hasn't been particularly impressive in the last month or so, but they still got Stroud. They still got Nico Collins. I do think, coming off the bye, I am curious to see if the Texans can be a little bit more consistent and convincing in their wins to make you feel a little bit better that this is a team that is going to be a handful to play in the playoffs. Because right now they're just, their defense is just very spotty. It just is. They have great games. They have great moments. And then they have some really bad moments and porous moments in there. And their offense, with their inability to protect right now and consistently run block, it just does lead to a very boom or bust product on that side of the ball. So I'm curious to see if they can come out of the bye and, show that this is an elitely, coached team that can straighten things out at the right time, because I do think they have the potential to do that. But they are getting passed up, just as our last 3 teams were passed up by the LA Rams. A monster week for the Rams. Not just beating a great tier 1 Bills team, spoiler alert, but looking like the team offensively that heading into the year we knew was possible. I think this was my number 3 ranked offense heading into the year. They just haven't been that this year, right? They've been so injured, not just the receiver injuries earlier in the year, but they've had those receivers for a few weeks now, if not, a month or two. But the offensive line was supposed to be a serious strength for this team. And I would say up until this week, they've been so injured on that offensive line that it's been a legitimate weakness for this Rams team. And they've kind of had to win with better defense than you expected, frankly, heading into the year. I think they're really well coached on that side of the ball. They've done a good job getting that pass rush working. Not so much this week, but they've had to really lean on heroic moments from Stafford and this run game to win. This week, 0 sacks. I think just like 9 pressures in an offensive shootout for the Rams against the Bills this week. And we knew that was possible coming into the year because they've invested in this offensive line. They played really well last year. For an aging quarterback that's not the most mobile guy, that's a big deal. And you see Stafford able to just shred apart, a good defense that their coverage was pretty tight for a lot of these throws. But man, Stafford, when he's protected, is a top 5 quarterback in the NFL, in my opinion. And that's before we mention some of the catches that guys like Kupp and Puka can do. You've obviously got McVay and his brilliant play calling. This is scary for the NFC teams for the NFC West. To know that this version of the Rams is kind of out there right now, just hanging out. And for, teams like Washington, maybe Green Bay, to know there is a team legitimately pushing for that wild card spot, and for your, kind of Eagles and Lions at the top too, getting that 2 seed, the thought that you might have to play this Rams team. Or again, back to the teams like the Vikings and the Packers. Do the Rams win this division? Do you have to go to LA and beat this team? Like, this is not a team that you want to run into with them kind of straightening things out and figuring things out at the right time for the Rams and the wrong team for the rest of the NFC. Now, we'll see how they can hold up against the Niners on Thursday Night Football. We said very similar things about the Niners as well. And the winner of that game is going to be, putting themselves in a position to make things interesting here. With all the praise on the Rams, this is not a trustworthy defense, as we saw against the Bills this week. So, a very dangerous Rams team here. And then the Seattle Seahawks sticking in the NFC West at number 9. They're climbing up 2 spots, and they're really pushing that next tier for me. And they have an opportunity to get up there. I think if they beat the Packers on Sunday Night Football, and I think that's very possible, especially because they're in Seattle, they just might take that jump up, because that would effectively clinch the NFC West, earn them a home playoff game. But it's not so much about that. It's that this team has an identity, and this Mike Macdonald hire has been everything you could have possibly dreamed about. This defense just makes things extremely hard on the opposing offense. They again have found that identity on that side of the ball. They really understand what works for them. The midseason addition of Ernest Jones and going to one of my favorite day 3 draft picks at linebacker and Tyrese Knight has really rounded out that defense. The secondary's healthy, and Mike Macdonald is bringing everything to the table in terms of all of the different schemes and blitzes with that unique athletic front that this team has. So, they're getting back to their roots a little bit. Like, this is genuinely one of the best defenses in the league right now. That wasn't that way for the first half of the year, but everything really checks out in the sense of, like, we see this all the time where these great DCs come in. Their defense takes a while to kind of discover themselves within the new system, get that new identity. But it really adds up with the talent base, who the coach is, the results the last few weeks. This really is, in my mind, one of the best defenses in the league right now as we head down the home stretch. The main thing is, like, offensively, who is this team? This week was interesting because I think they made a realization, like, okay, we can actually really trust this defense now in a way that they haven't been able to do in the Geno Smith era, even earlier in this year. And, Geno's had to play a lot of hero ball behind a bad offensive line. This week, they said, no, we just got to not turn the ball over, run the ball, play physical, make a few big throws when we need them, but we don't need Geno to be the hero. And that's the best case scenario, because Geno's shown, he can be polarizing in those moments, right? A lot of good situations where he's leading game-winning drives when you really need him. But when you put too much on his plate, he's also shown that he can kind of lose you games at times too. So to not have to lean on that volatility, this is just a much more consistent team. And the way Charbonnet is running the ball right now, Kenneth Walker wasn't even out there. So, if they can find the right balance with those two guys moving forward, this Seahawks team could really be figuring things out at the right time. And this is only the beginning, right? This is just the first year of this kind of build with Macdonald, but I have just been so impressed. And just the biggest of weeks here against the Packers on Sunday night. Going to be a great game for both teams. But again, not quite putting the Seahawks into that next tier. The playoff caliber teams are good teams, but teams that, maybe could win a playoff game, but not realistically looking at them as legitimate Super Bowl contenders at this point in time. But these teams in this next tier are teams that it wouldn't really stun me if they won the Super Bowl. They're not the most likely candidates to do it. They're going to need a little bit of luck and to play great football in the playoffs. The way I broke this down on the Fully Inflated Football podcast last week is this tier are teams that essentially can't make mistakes and win against tier 1 football teams, whereas the tier 1 football teams are teams that realistically can make mistakes and still win because they're just that good. But this Super Bowl potential tier is going to start with the Pittsburgh Steelers. They take care of business against the Browns this week. This defensive line is they're just game wreckers, man. And that's why this team can beat anybody. It's why this team can go on a run. Russ is just playing so well. He frankly looks closer to his, Seattle prime, certainly than he did to kind of whatever he was in Denver. It's just been the best decision they could make to bring him in, to go with him over Fields. Even in a game without George Pickens, just balling out against the Browns and Myles Garrett. So just continue to be so impressed by the Steelers. Didn't really think that I would have them in a kind of Super Bowl tier of teams, but they've earned it this year. They climbed to 10-3 and are poised to get that home game and win this division over the Ravens. But then we got the Green Bay Packers at number 7. I did break their Thursday night game against the Lions down on my podcast. I'll drop that link in the description below if you want, further analysis of that big game we saw on Thursday. But yeah, I mean, they showed that they're close, right? They showed that I think they belong in this tier. If they played a cleaner football game in Detroit, if Christian Watson doesn't flail through the air and fumble the ball, they might win that game in Detroit. But again, this is a team that can't really make mistakes and beat the elite teams. But they didn't show that they're, pretenders either, right? Like they came out and competed. Yes, the Lions were really banged up. The Packers had a lot of key injuries as well. We'll see if Jair Alexander can get healthy down the stretch. Romeo Doubs is a big, he is effectively their number one wide receiver in the sense of like, he's the separator. He's the reliable third down guy. Getting him back would be big. I think what Edgerrin Cooper does for their third down blitzing is a big deal as well. He's been out. So, they're not at full strength themselves. The biggest thing for the Packers, if you want some positivity, is Jordan Love is doing the thing he did last year where he's playing his best ball down the stretch. He's looked great, and that's obviously, however this season ends, this was going to be kind of a polarizing season with him being, I don't want to call him a one-year wonder, but it was certainly a one-year thing with Jordan Love, right? So, this year could have gone south, especially with some of the uglier moments earlier in the year, but he's really straighten things out, and you're feeling really good about where you're at with Jordan Love if you're a Packers fan right now. No movement for them this week with the tight loss in Detroit. I think we had them at a good spot heading into that game. Then we got the Ravens at number 6. They are going to lose a couple spots. A lot of teams losing their spots on the bye week just because the teams behind them had impressive big weeks. So nothing really against the Ravens here. They're still a team with Super Bowl potential. Lamar does have to straighten things back out. Frankly, the last 2-3 weeks, he just hasn't been the MVP quarterback that he was the first, 10 games of the year or whatever. It felt like he was going to run away with the MVP, but it's not that he's played bad, but he just hasn't played like the best quarterback in the NFL like he did for the first 2/3 of the season. He's had a few more overthrows and stuff. I don't want to put it all on Lamar, though. Their line play is just iffy. Their pass rush isn't what it was last year. Their offensive line has been, good in the run game, I would say, and so in drop back pass protection. So, again, I on the bye week, I don't feel that much different about the Ravens, but I do think a couple other teams here just feel a little bit more complete than them at this point in time. But one of the teams jumping the Ravens this week, which may or may not come as a surprise to some, but the Minnesota Vikings. And this is a Sam Darnold conversation. It really comes down to that. We know Kevin O'Connell, the playmakers, the defense, Brian Flores, that has been heavily praised throughout the season. And that's obviously a huge core of why this team is so potent. But for a massive chunk of the season, maybe up until maybe the last 2 weeks, there's been this kind of hanging Sam Darnold cloud of like, okay, looks really good, but can we really trust this guy? I trust Sam Darnold right now, man. I feel like I know who he is. He's a guy that has really developed his processing. He has, frankly, in terms of like overall arm talent, it's bordering on elite, like not just arm strength, but the ability to kind of throw these touch passes, layering the ball, hitting all three levels, hit the deep ball, hit the ball, like hit these throws, getting hit from the pocket, like off platform. And that was him coming out of college, right? He was the definition of a C-ball hit ball arm where he can put the ball wherever he wants, whenever the hell he wants. He's weaponizing that. It's special. And he is a guy that might put the ball in harm's way once or twice a game. I'm willing to live with that when the defense is good as it is. This team can strike back immediately with big plays to these playmakers with that arm talent we talked about. And when you have a play caller and a head coach like Kevin O'Connell, I can live with a turnover and still think that the Vikings have Super Bowl potential. But if you get a game like this against the Falcons where Darnold doesn't turn the ball over, because there's that outcome too, it's not like he's guaranteed to turn the ball every single week. This team can beat anybody in the NFL. So the Vikings are really, really dangerous. And, obviously jumping the Ravens is a big deal. They are creeping up towards that top tier for me. Just the more and more we see Darnold playing like this. And Vikings fans, I think this was a turning point in this conversation. But it's been a big talking point this year of like, do they bring Darnold back? What do they do with J.J. McCarthy? And I do regret when they had that Jags game and Darnold had all those ugly interceptions, I did flip and say Darnold won't be back with this team. That was kind of the low point in Darnold's season. Ever since that moment, though, he has been on a skyrocket back towards playing like a top 7 quarterback in the NFL this season. And this isn't your typical, mid-career breakout type. This is a 27-year-old quarterback that has had disastrous situations. We've seen what things have looked like with the Jets and the Panthers throughout the years. That's where he's been. We know he's got the talent. Things are just coming together. And for me, I understand if you have faith that J.J. McCarthy could be something like this. But J.J. McCarthy doesn't have the arm that Sam Darnold has. He doesn't have the experience that Darnold has. And he sure as hell hasn't shown the upside that Sam Darnold is giving this Vikings team right now. So for me, it's almost a no-brainer at this point that Sam Darnold, maybe he gets franchise tagged, maybe. But I think we are really heading towards a pretty substantial extension for Sam Darnold. And then who knows what they do with J.J. McCarthy, whether they trade him off to give this team even more weaponry or defensive support would be great too. Or maybe they just stash J.J. McCarthy and develop him. I don't know. But this is getting very, very interesting for the Vikings for this season where, this team could absolutely go on a run. Yeah, Brian Flores especially is going to make these offenses, he's going to put them in hell in the playoffs. So very excited for the Vikings, and it's a fun time to return to Minnesota. But the Kansas City Chiefs, they climbed to 11-2 this week, beating the Chargers, and I've come around on them slightly, and they're going to climb up a spot in these rankings. Really jumping the Ravens is what this is about. I've come around a little bit, and I want to give full credit to Nick Wright, actually, who went on the podcast with Steve Palazzolo and Sam Monson. He was talking about the Chiefs and made a really good point about like that Raiders game, especially, there's a 3rd and 1 at the end of that Raiders game where they could have run the ball and put the Raiders away with 2 minutes left to just milk out the clock and finish the game. But instead, they run a play-action deep shot to Xavier Worthy, the same exact play that they won the Super Bowl off of, throwing to Marquez Valdes-Scantling, who plays the same role. According to Nick Wright, I didn't go back and confirm this, but according to Nick Wright, it was the exact same play call. They wanted to make sure Worthy could make that play so that they can count on it in the playoffs. This team is just different in the sense that they're playing for a three-peat. This is like the late-stage San Antonio Spurs. They can play with their food a little bit, and they're going to have some moments like that make these games closer than they probably should be. And they know, okay, when it's crunch time and there's 2 minutes left, 3 minutes left, Mahomes he can handle this. We're going to be just fine. As long as the game is close, they're going to win more games than not. Now, is there the other side of the coin that, they do play things a little bit too close to the belt, a little bit close for comfort, and you can't always count on that. They have to this point been able to count on that, but if you're going against great teams like the Eagles and the Bills and the Lions, who all rank above them and in a tier above them, could those teams actually pull away a little bit? Maybe. So it's a very kind of polarizing, nuanced conversation with the Chiefs. There's Chiefs fans saying, you're a hater. This team should be number one until they show that they can lose games. And then there's people that are like, the Chiefs are complete pretenders. This is the same team as the Steelers in 2022 when they were 11-0 or whatever, and they tailed off. I don't think it's as black and white as either of that. For me, this feels like the right spot for the Chiefs. Until they become a more convincing dominant team, I am going to keep them out of that like Super Bowl or bust tier. Like the top three teams we're going to talk about, if they don't win the Super Bowl, I would consider that a disappointment. With how the Chiefs have looked this year and all the injuries they've endured, I'm not going to say it'd be a disappointment if the Chiefs didn't win the Super Bowl. And like I said, this tier are teams that they can't afford to make mistakes and win against those top tier teams. And I still think that's where the Chiefs are, but they set themselves up to not make those mistakes as much as any team in the league, right? So that's where I'm at on the Chiefs this week. You guys can let me know what you think of that placement. But our top three is not going to change this week. I've got Eagles, Bills, Lions. I thought about putting the Bills at 3 and the Eagles at 2, but really Eagles and Bills had pretty discouraging weeks this week, with some good moments in there as well. For the Eagles, still a dominant day on the ground. Saquon Barkley he's made as strong of a case for MVP that a running back has made since Adrian Peterson, in my opinion. And it's just a force, man. That offense is just a force on the ground. But look, I made that Jalen Hurts video like week 5 or whatever. And, it was a lot of criticism of Jalen Hurts. I would say a lot of that has still shown. Like, this team can't really get into the drop back passing game and pick you apart. This is 8 out of 9 weeks where Saquon Barkley has more rushing attempts than Jalen Hurts has passing attempts. Like, that's where this team is at. They can kill teams that way. No doubt about it. But would I be a little bit concerned if this team ran into a team like the Vikings, the number 1 run defense in the league, or the Detroit Lions, a top 3 run defense in the league, and they had to lean on Jalen Hurts? I would. I just would. So they're not moving. I'm not panicking about the Eagles. This is an absolute super team of a roster, and it's not that Hurts just sucks. Like, he brings a lot to the ground. He's taking care of the football. He's doing what he needs to do. But that is this team's Achilles heel, right? But then at number 2, the Bills, I'm not going to panic yet, because this team has been just a model, an absolute model of consistency all year long. And even within this game, they showed you they've got the MVP. Josh Allen is going to have to lose it at this point. He is just unbelievable, unstoppable, paired with an offense that generally throughout the course of the season has shown they've got a run game, they've got good play calling, they've got run after catch threats. Like, they don't need Josh Allen to be Superman, but he can. Now, my biggest concerns on the Bills coming into the year were Sean McDermott as the head coach and a defense that just doesn't have an it factor about them. The pass rush this week, extremely underwhelming against the Rams. I do think their coverage unit is in a pretty good spot. They just were getting mossed against the Rams this week. Like, I'm pretty confident to say that will be by far the worst defensive performance they have on the season based on the rest of the play this season. And I do think McDermott has shown like their floor is going to be pretty damn high as a defense generally, but it is a little bit scary to know that something like this might be possible in the playoffs when that's happened to them in the Sean McDermott era. So it's, again, I don't want to overreact to it, but it is a little bit scary to know that this is a possibility for this Bills team. But really, I mean, peewee level game management at the end of this game. Everything from accepting the holding call, where you go from, Stafford getting shoved out of bounds on a 4th and 7. I do think the Rams were likely going to punt or kick the field goal in that situation. You've given up, countless numbers of yards and big throws in this game. Why the hell would you put Stafford back out there on a 3rd and 17, who's fully capable of completing that, given what your pass rush has been in this game, let alone the play call on that play is like a prevent cover 2. I'd have to go back and watch, see if it's cover 6, cover 2, cover 4, whatever it was. But it was like a total top down they just completely gave the Rams all those yards back. Like, if you're going to accept a penalty, at least come out and play real defense, right? No, they accept the penalty, but then invite the opportunity for Stafford to, get back into the huddle, get an extra 2 yards on the play, give McVay more time to think about it, to go for it. So I hate that. I hate accepting that penalty. And then you get to the game-ending situation. I mean, just horrible, horrible game management. Probably should have kicked the field goal and then attempted the onside kick, because you're down 9, right? You're very likely going to need to go touchdown field goal anyway. So when they get down to the 5-yard line and the clock's running and they decide to go QB sneak, they should kick the field goal and then kick off. You have all 3 timeouts. That would have been an option. But to call a timeout after sneaking it, and frankly, I don't have a problem with the sneak, because you can get back up, you can run another play pretty damn quickly, and they've been so successful on the QB sneak this year. So I don't hate the sneak call personally, but to burn a timeout after that, it's just, again, peewee level head coach game management, inexcusable from Sean McDermott. And all I can say is I hope that they learn from this moment. I hope the defense gets this out of their system. I hope McDermott learned how to handle these game-ending situations. But the problem is, this has not been the first example of a Sean McDermott Bills team doing this. Very, very frustrating week for the Bills. Still feel pretty good about the sort of peripherals and the overall picture for this Bills team. But frustrating to say the least. And then the Lions maintain the number 1 spot. I think at their lowest point in the season in terms of injuries, you can really hope that things are going to get better moving forward. I mean, Ali McNeil left this game in the first quarter against the Packers. At their lowest point, they still beat a really good Packers team. Just an absolute ass-kicking performance, a resilient win. This is the best team in football. They got to get healthy to feel better about them. They're not foolproof. They are beatable, especially right now with all these injuries. But there's just so many good words to go around for the Lions that have been said throughout the course of the season. I broke this game down in the podcast. Again, if you want to check that out from Saturday as well. But that's going to do it for the Week 15 Power Rankings. You guys are going to have to let me know in the comments down below what you think. Again, no Power Rankings next week. So the next time we do this, a lot of this stuff is going to play out. We'll see if teams like the Vikings can jump into the next tier. Can the Seahawks make that jump? What about the Dolphins and Niners? Where do they come in? So I kind of like the 2-week Power Ranking stuff sometimes. Gives you a little bit more to react to. And less to overreact to. But that is all I've got. Thank you so much for watching. I appreciate you guys. Please do hit that like button on the way out. And I'll see you soon. Podcast Wednesday. And we're going to do a Cam Ward video here on the channel. Probably Friday, but we'll see when that officially comes out. We're out of here. Peace out.